Alright, this is Unit 4, Section 2, Complex Numbers. So let's just start with the first one, negative square roots. We're going to find the square root of the number. So if I have a negative under my square root, I can't normally do that. So first thing I'm going to do is split it up into square root of negative 1 times square root of 45. Okay. Now for notes, before I move on, let's just go ahead and say that square root of negative 1 is equal to I, which is an imaginary unit. So if I have square root of 1, I could change that to just I. Okay. Now I can do the 45. There's no square root of 45, so I have to split it apart. So for 45, I can do 9 times 5. I can also split 9 into 3 times 3. I can't change 5 anymore. It's just 5 and 1, and I don't need to do that. So from here, I look for pairs of numbers, so groups of 2. I have a group of 3, and then my 5 is just by itself. So for every pair, my 3's, my 3 comes out of the square root. My 5, my individual, stays in. Okay. Now the only other thing is, if you remember this, great, this will be familiar, but the only extra step now is I have this I. This I just goes in the front also. You can do I times 3 square root of 5, or most people just do 3I square root of 5. That would be your answer. And that's it. Alright, number 2, a little different. So normally I can split the negative 36 into negative 1 and 36, or the shortcut, if you will. If you want to kind of go a little faster, if you ever have a negative, it just comes out as an I. So I have 3I square root of 36. Now on this one, there is a square root of 36. It's just 6. So I can change that to a 6, and I have 3I times 6. Well, you do 3 times 6 is 18I, and that's my answer. So sometimes you don't have square roots left in the answer, and sometimes you do. It just depends on the number. So that's all you do for those. Alright, moving on. Now I have complex numbers with 2 variables. So I want to find x and y. The first thing I would do is take the i's out. So I have negative yi equals negative 8i, and then next to that I can write whatever's left over. So I have 15 equals negative 3x. So now my x and my y are separated, my i's are separate. I can solve for both. So in the first one, for negative yi equals negative 8i, because I have I on both sides, if you divide by I on either one, you can just get rid of them. Doesn't matter which way it goes. So I'm left with negative y equals negative 8. Now anytime you have a negative y, I want it positive, so what you're doing is you divide by negative 1 on both sides. That makes these positive. And so I end up with y equals 8. So I got y. Now I just go over here and solve for x like normal. So I have 15 equals negative 3x. All you do is divide by negative 3. That gives me negative 5 equals x, and I'm done. And that's it. So on 4, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and take the i's out. So I have 3i equals yi. and then I write my whatever's left over here. So for y, again the i's just go away and I'm left with 3 equals y, and I have nothing else to do as soon as this works. And that's it. And on the right, all you do is divide by 2. So I have x equals 3. And I'm done. So these are fairly simple. You just got to split them up correctly. And you have 1 or 2 steps to solve. Then that's it. Alright, the next part is complex number operations. So it says simplify. So on the first one, number 5, I have to combine like terms, but before I can do that, anytime you have a negative in the front of parentheses, you have to distribute. So I take that negative times 2, negative times negative I. If I have a positive like this one, I don't have to change anything. I can just get rid of the parentheses. So let me rewrite this. I'll have 9. So I have negative times 2 is just negative 2. Negative times negative I is plus I. And then you just write the rest of it. Now from here, I'm just combining like terms. So I have a 9 minus 2 plus 5. And I have an I plus 3I. So 9 minus 2 is 7, plus 5 is 12. And then I have I plus 3I is just 4I. And that's it. So mostly combining like terms on that one. This one is a little bit different. So just like with normal binomials that we use, you want to distribute or FOIL, whatever term you've been taught. So I do the first 2 times 1, 2 times negative 4, that gives me 2 minus 8i. And then you do the second one, 3i times 1 and times negative 4i. So 3i times 1 is just 3i. 3i times minus 4i is negative 12. And because I have 2 i's, I have an I and an I, it'd be I squared. Alright, now before I keep going, let's go down here. And important thing you need to add is if I have I squared, that would change to negative 1. So I squared is negative 1. Anytime you get that, you got to change it. So like for instance right here, this I squared will change and I'll end up with negative 12 times negative 1. So I squared is negative 1. And then of course the rest of this I can just do 2, and I can combine like terms. I have negative 8i plus 3i. I get negative 5i. So then I get 2 minus 5i. Negative 12 times negative 1 is plus 12. And my last thing is I have 2 plus 12 now. I can add those. So I get 14 minus 5i. And that's my answer. And that's it for that one. Now we have 2 more complex solutions. So we got to solve the equation. These are very similar to yesterday. I want to solve for x squared, do the square root, and have the plus minus answer. The only difference is I'm going to have negative square roots. So I'm combining the first part of today with part of yesterday. So the first thing I'm going to do is solve for x squared. So I want to move this 36 over here. So I do plus becomes minus 36. So I have 3 squared equals negative 36. Now I want to divide by 3. Because remember, I'm solving for x squared. Negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12. And now I do square root. So I get x equals plus minus square root of negative 12. Now I can't leave it like that. So if I go over here, I have all this room. If you remember the shortcut that we do, the negative comes out and becomes I, square root of 12. And now I can split this up. So I have 3, 4, that's 2 and 2. Okay, so again, I look for pairs of numbers. So I have 2 2's. Those come out. I have 1 3, that stays in. My I also stays out because I was already there. And then I have my plus minus over here that goes in the front. Because remember, anytime you add a square root, you have to do positive and negative. And that's my answer. And last one, this one's very similar. I'm still going to move this over here. I just have a little different situation on this question. So negative 15 minus 12, and then divide by 2. And then of course square root. So I have x squared equals plus minus square root of negative 27 over 2. Alright, so let's go over here to all the space that we have. So if you remember from yesterday, if I have a fraction, you can split it up and do the top and the bottom separate. Okay, so I have square root of negative 27, square root of 2. Alright, on the top, I have the negative comes out. So here, again, we have some space. We can do it over here. So the negative comes out and becomes an I, right? Then I have 27. Then I can split this up. I have 9 and 3. The 9 splits up into 3 and 3. So I have a pair of 3's that come out and 1 3 that stays in, and my I. So on the top of my fraction now, I have 3i square root of 3 over. Now let's look at the bottom though. On the bottom, notice it's just square root of 2. I can't reduce that. I can't split it up any further. That's as low as it goes. So I'm just going to leave that there. Now here's the problem though, and don't forget the plus minus. The problem is I cannot have a square root in the bottom in my denominator of the fraction. So I have to move it to the top. So if you want to write this down, you can, but I'm going to show you the long way of what you're doing and then show you the shortcut. So here's the long way. If I have a square root on the bottom, what I'm really doing is I'm multiplying by square root of 2 over square root of 2, because that's the same thing as 1. That way I don't change the value. So whatever the square root is on the bottom, that's what you multiply by. So on top, I would just multiply 2 times 3. The bottom would be 2 times 2. So I'd have plus minus 3i square root of 6 over square root of 4. And of course the square root of 4 is 2, so that would change to 3i square root of 6 over 2. And that is my answer. So that's what you're doing, but let me show you the shortcut. So I'll erase all this. If you want that way, you can leave it, that's fine. So here's the shortcut. Whatever square root is on the bottom, I add it to the top and multiply. And then on the bottom, I just cross out the square root and keep the number only. So square root of 2 just becomes 2. So now on the top, I have plus minus 3i. Now I did square root of 2 times square root of 3, which is square root of 6. And the bottom, we crossed out square root of 2 and kept the 2. I get the same answer. So less work to show, but it's the same thing, and at least you understand. You can do it either way. You get the same answer. As long as you understand what it is you're actually doing when doing the shortcut, really you just move it to the top and multiply it, and then drop the square root on the bottom. And that's all you're doing.